Welcome to Elizabeth Reads. Here we have the 39 Steps. Chapter 1, Murder in Portland Place. On that muggy June night in 1914, I must admit that I was feeling rather fed up with London. Having spent most of my life as a mining engineer in the wilds of Rhodesia, my return to England had been tediously dull by comparison. Yet, as I approached my rented house that evening, little could I have imagined the breathtaking adventures that lay ahead of me. I had just turned my key in the lock when a slim, bearded man appeared from nowhere and bundled me indoors. "What the devil?" I began. "Pardon the intrusion, Mr. Hannay," panted the stranger. He dashed across to the window and peered down cautiously at the street below. "How do you know my name?" I asked. "Oh, I know a fair deal about you," he replied, drawing the curtains. "Chiefly that you're a man to be trusted." Despite my better judgment, I was intrigued by the young fellow. "My name is Scudder, Franklin P. Scudder," he announced, "and I need your help, sir." "I'll listen to you," I replied, switching on the light, "but that is all I will promise." Scudder took his seat with his back to the window. "Mr. Hannay, here in London on June 15th, an attempt will be made to assassinate a man called Karolides. I'd read about this Karolides in the papers. He was the Greek premier and just about the only one who could prevent a war in Europe. If I can lie low till that date," continued Scudder, "I might prevent a catastrophe." "But who would want Karolides dead?" I asked. "A group of foreign agents known as the Black Stone. They're on my tail, and they'll stop at nothing to get me." The young man's eyes darted towards the window. "The head of that illustrious organization is particularly interested in making my acquaintance." The look on his face spoke volumes. This gang leader was obviously a force to be reckoned with. "He's a master of disguise, Mr. Hannay," he went on, raising his right hand. "But if ever you encounter a man missing the top joint of his fourth finger, then be on your guard." The whole tale seemed far-fetched. Yet, if this fellow was spinning me a yarn, he was a very good actor. I thought for a moment. I'd wanted excitement. Well, here it was, right on my very own doorstep. "Okay, I will trust you," I said at last. "I believe you're straight, but if not, I should warn you that I'm a handy man with a gun." He clasped my hand in his. "Thank you, Mr. Hannay," he said warmly. "You won't know I'm here." The next 4 days passed rapidly, and Scudder was as good as his word. He spent most of his time closeted in my study, scribbling away in his small notebook. Then, on the 5th day, I returned home in the early hours of the morning. I switched on the hall light and opened the drawing-room door. The scene illuminated before me sent a shudder of horror down my spine. There, upon the floor, lay the body of Franklin P. Scudder, pierced through the heart by a knife. Chapter 2, Desperate Decisions. Having assured myself that poor Scudder's killers were no longer in residence, I considered my position. The devils must be aware that Scudder would have taken me into his confidence. How long before they tried to dispose of me in a similar fashion? And here I was with a dead body in my home. If I went to the police, they were hardly likely to believe my story about assassination attempts and foreign agents. What I needed was evidence. Of course, the notebook. My earlier inspection of the house had alerted me to the fact that Scudder's killers had been looking for something. Drawers, cupboards, even the clothes in my wardrobe had all been rifled, and now I knew why. After a long, fruitless search of my own, I slumped down despondently into an armchair and took out my pipe. Plunging my hand into the tobacco jar at my elbow, I felt something curious. I could hardly believe it. There, in my grasp, was the very thing I'd been hunting for. I flipped through the pages of the little black book, hoping to find some answers, but the whole thing was written in code. While I consider myself as being pretty sharp when it comes to ciphers, after an hour or so racking my brain, I was no further forward. I realized this puzzle would take time to crack. My only hope was to lie low somewhere remote until I had the evidence to make the government take Scudder's warning seriously. The Scottish borders seemed the best bet. I edged slowly to the window and looked down at the street. It was empty, save for a tall figure standing on the corner opposite. Was he a member of the Black Stone? Had he seen me return? I couldn't take any chances. Quickly, I changed out of my evening clothes and into a sturdy tweed suit. Glancing at the railway timetable, I stuffed Scudder's notebook and a few essentials into my pockets. The fire escape outside the kitchen led me down to a deserted alleyway at the rear of my building. So far, so good. I checked my watch and broke into a sprint. The express train to Scotland would be leaving St. Pancras in 10 minutes. Chapter 3, On the Run. When I reached the station, there was no time to buy a ticket. I barged past the platform officials and jumped into the last carriage of the Scottish Express with seconds to spare. As the train rattled north, I pulled Scudder's notebook from my pocket. I was pretty certain that all I needed was a keyword to unlock the code. But as the hours passed, everything I tried failed to make any sense. Eventually, I dozed off, and I only just woke in time to change at Dumfries. A slow Galloway train took me through a land of little wooded glens to a great wide moorland gleaming with lochs and fringed by hills. As the compartment filled with locals, I felt as if every one of them was eyeing me with suspicion. Then I caught sight of something that only heightened my anxiety. The man next to me had a copy of the midday edition of The Scotsman. There, on the front page, screamed a headline that made my blood run cold. Portland Place murder. Killer flees north. Police investigating the brutal murder as a... And then it cuts off. The police would have wasted no time contacting the ports and stations with my description. Those officials at St. Pancras must have remembered me. I suddenly became aware of two men opposite who were engrossed in the same newspaper. They must have read the report. Was there a description of me? Had I already been recognized? I felt as if half a dozen pairs of eyes were boring into my very soul. At that moment, the train shuddered to a halt. We were at the end of a small stone bridge spanning a coursing stream. It seemed as if fate was giving me a nudge. As casually as possible, I left the compartment and walked along the corridor. Making sure I could not be seen, I opened a door and dropped into a tangle of hazel bushes, which edged the line. At least he waited for it to stop. I scrambled through the thicket, reached the edge of the stream, and soon found cover in the bushes 100 yards away. From my hiding place, I could see the reason for the train's sudden halt. A stray sheep had wandered onto the line ahead. Luckily, the guard who had already alighted to remove this obstruction had clearly been too busy to notice me. He herded the beast clear of the track, and within 5 minutes the train was on its way. I only hoped that no one on board had witnessed my dramatic departure. Chapter 4, Codebreaker. There was no time to dwell on what might have been a hasty decision. I broke cover and continued my journey across country. At about 6 that evening, I came to a rough stretch of road where the welcoming lights of a solitary inn sparkled in the twilight. A good night's rest did wonders for my optimism, and the next morning I felt ready to pit myself against Scudder's code once more. For the best part of 3 hours, I wrestled with the contents of the little black book, until finally it dawned on me. What if Black Stone were the keywords? A few minutes' frantic scribbling proved me right, and soon I had the bones of Scudder's discoveries in front of me. They did not make for pleasant reading. Scudder believed that immediately after Karolidis' death, top secret details of British military security were to be stolen from a diplomat who was due to convey them to our allies in France. The thieves would hand this information to the German government. Being thus assured of victory, Germany would declare war on Britain. Despite my efforts, the precise meaning of some of Scudder's notes remained obscure, such as a dozen odd references to 39 steps. Their last mention was followed by the phrase, I counted them. 10:17 p.m. high tide. I could only hope they weren't important. Whatever the significance of that dog. Whatever the significance of these cryptic passages, the basic knowledge I had in my possession was explosive enough to be taken seriously. Somehow, I had to alert the authorities. Okay, that's it for now. I will see you next time, and we will finish this book, The 39 Steps.